Question number 2 reads, can the federal government properly direct public K through 12 education in a country where the funding is unequal across districts? So, Mr. Taylor, it's going to be your start.
Oh, okay. Education is best handled at the local level, I believe. The more layers of bureaucracy that you apply to the process, the less effective and efficient the process becomes. In the state of California alone, it's reported that 40% of the educational dollar is spent up in Sacramento in bureaucracy. That's a travesty. That should be no more than 10%, and hopefully get it down to 5% if you're, and limit that as much as possible. Get those dollars out to the school sites for the students. The growing popularity of charter schools and homeschooling are experiencing in America clearly indicate that. President Barack Obama has determined that the education provided by the public schools in Washington, D.C. Aren't sufficient for his children, but then they haven't been for any president, and I don't expect them. But that's just an example. Every parent in the country should have the same level of local control over their children's education. No federal government program or mandate should trump the parents' right to educational choice for their children and local control over the education of their children. In New Orleans, it's just been reported at the 5th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina that test scores are up by 40 to 45% before Hurricane Katrina. Prior to the hurricane, the students there tested at the 20th percentile. Now they're testing at 65th percentile. The public school system was a travesty before Katrina, but now there's 75% of the schools are charter schools in New Orleans. They're being successful. Thank you.
I think it seems pretty apparent that the federal government can't properly direct anything. I challenge anyone. I don't think many people can come up with a good example of what they do right, which begs the question, why give them more control? Glad to hear it. I think we need to, I agree, it needs to be more money and more control on a local level. There were, even in places that are as financially distressed as Harlem, there was a charter school that was doing extremely well. You know, the people cared, they really cared, and they were able to operate without, with less government interference, and they were succeeding. People would line up around the block to get into this school, just to get in for a chance to get on the lottery to get their kids in this class. And Obama shut it down. So I think we need to get the federal government out. I would suggest, if you don't want to privatize education, then at least vouchers so that the money, the same amount of money goes with each child, and they get to choose the school that they want to go to, and that would create competition, which we all know would create a better product and lower prices. So that's my idea. Get them out.
One of my heroes is Thurgood Marshall, who incidentally yesterday was the anniversary of his confirmation to the Supreme Court. The main reason he's one of my heroes is Brown versus Board of Education, and we need to implement, finally, Brown versus Board of Education across the country. I mentioned earlier I was lucky in a lot of ways. I went to some excellent public schools. One of my high school teachers still does speaking engagements internationally. We need to raise all our schools to that level, and I don't even think those schools are at that level anymore. But we need to raise the underfunded schools, Alice L. High School in Salinas, and there's many, many, many more, to that level. And the federal government can play a role basically in minimum standards and funding, but most of the educational experience has to be left to local control, or otherwise it won't work. But so many schools, probably all schools now in California, are underfunded, and that is where the federal government can chip in.
Well, the misconception here is that the federal government is involved in K-12 education in some big way, probably because of the whole discussion about Leave No Child Left Behind. But in reality, the funding for K-12 education is less than 10% by the federal government. Federal government never, in the history of this country, was very involved in education. It was always left up to states, and states left it up to a mechanism of creating school districts and elected school boards and so on. And states vary with the number of school districts. California has about 1,200 of them. In this congressional district, we have the largest school districts, the Pajaro Unified School District, and we have several that are, that is a little fast, several that are just K-12 Pacific Valley. So we have one-room school district with 34 students in it that are unified. It is a real mix. But where the federal government did get involved was the war on poverty, and that's what began the first involvement of federal monies to states. And I think it was right that we did it. We got into special ed, saying no child could be left behind because of special needs. No child could be left behind because they were migratory kids. No child could be left behind because they came from poor communities. And we created Head Start programs and ESEA Title I. Those are the monies that do come into this district, and all our poor districts receive a good categorical aid funding because they have those categories. What we need to do is make sure that our low-performing schools are turned around. And that's leadership at the local level. That's not the federal government. We can give carrots, but the stick is in the local level. And as we've learned from Salinas, it's no longer just trying to get the mentor teacher in the classroom or an excellent principal. It takes a village. And I think we're beginning to turn that corner in Salinas through the gang violence. Not through gang violence, but we're dealing with gang violence.
All right. Now we're getting somewhere, a little bit less consensus.